Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever you're listening to this, and welcome to History 328I, a World of Warcraft, video games, and the reception of history. My name is Jordan Slavic, and I'll be the instructor for this online course. This first lecture is going to serve simply as an introduction to the course. So I'll introduce myself briefly as the instructor for this course. We'll have a brief discussion about what to expect in this course, and then we'll spend the rest of the time in this lecture looking at the Elms page, showing you how to navigate and find the different files and readings for the course, and then finishing with a brief overview of the syllabus. So hopefully by the end of this lecture, you'll have an idea of what to expect in the next 6 weeks we're going to spend together. So first, a little bit about me. This summer marks my 5th year at University of Maryland, both as a doctorate student as well as an instructor. As the course title implies, I work in the Department of History here on campus. And while I've taught and I've worked with students throughout history, American history, medieval history, ancient history, I generally focus myself in my own studies and research on the ancient world. So primarily ancient Rome and ancient Greece. For those unfamiliar with the general timeline of history, my focus really is from around 800 BC, so before Christ or before the Common Era, as it's now referred to, all the way up into around 500 AD or CE, after the Common Era. So this is kind of my wheelhouse in terms of what I research, my interests, and what I generally publish and teach in courses. Despite that fact, while we'll be spending some time in the ancient world, primarily weeks 2 and 3, we're also going to breach out and go beyond that. So week 4, as we'll see, will be on the medieval era. Week 5 will be on more of the modern era, specifically looking at apocalypse and zombies and kind of end of the world counterfactual history. The 6th week, as again we'll discuss looking at the syllabus in a few minutes, will strictly be dedicated to you working on your final paper, the final project for this course. When I'm not on campus teaching, reading, researching, I'm generally at home with my wife Ashley, my 7-month-old daughter Charlotte, and my golden retriever dog Riley. We live in the Gambrels, Odenton, Bowie area, so I understand the commute going into campus every single day and the headache that DC traffic comes with. So luckily for all of us, though, we will not have to be coming into campus given the fact that we are in an online course together, so we'll be connecting virtually, carrying on conversations through discussion posts and the like. So while it's unfortunate we won't have that face-to-face interaction, I'm still going to want to try and get to know each of you and have each of you get to know one another throughout the course of these 6 weeks. Another one of my interests, as you might expect, is video games. I enjoy playing with my friends. I also enjoy board games, card games. So gaming has always been a very important aspect of my leisure recreational life, but as well as my academic life with my studies. So I was very lucky when the department asked me to teach this course, which will focus heavily on video games and how video games interpret, reinterpret, represent, and recreate history. The basic focus of this course is really threefold. First, we'll be looking at history. This is a history course. We'll be looking at ancient Roman history, Athenian history, some medieval history, modern era history. There will be history in this course. The second main aspect of this course is what's called historiography. And we'll talk about what historiography means in the next lecture, but for now, historiography is really just the study of history. So both what we will be doing in this class, what I do as a profession, and what individuals have been doing for the last few thousand years in looking at the past. And finally, and probably the reason why many of you enrolled in this course, we'll be looking at video games. In terms of video games, we'll be looking at the development of video games, a little bit of the design and the motivations behind video games, but then of course, how video games go about recreating and representing the past, or the present, or even the future. In doing that, we'll be looking at both the narrative and the story arc of video games, as well as the actual content, the gameplay, the progression, the tech trees. We will really be getting into the nitty-gritty of some of these video games. And if you've read over the syllabus, you can see that we'll be looking at really a wide spread of video games, from Age of Empires to the Total War series, to Left 4 Dead and some of the zombie games, and even games such as Diablo 3. So if you've looked over the course syllabus and you're thinking, gosh, I really wish that we would have talked about Assassin's Creed, or The Witcher, or one of these games that you were really hoping to discuss, don't worry. everyone's going to have to pick a game of their own choosing to work with for the final paper. So if you feel let down, don't worry, there'll still be a chance to work with some games that aren't on the syllabus. Speaking of the syllabus, let's go ahead and go into the ELMS page and see how to navigate, find the syllabus as well as other files, and kind of look at this, in a sense, virtual classroom that all of our discussions and assignments will take place in for the next 6 weeks. I'm sure that most of you are already familiar with how to use ELMS, as you've probably used it in other classes already. If not, you go to elms.umd.edu, and then you'll have to log in. So you click log in, and you have to enter your directory ID as well as your password. If you have any kind of issue getting into the ELMS page or logging in, that's a question for IT. I don't have any kind of control over that. Once your page loads, you should come into your dashboard and you'll see all of these options for the different courses that you're enrolled in or that you've been enrolled in past semesters. So for our course, you can go ahead and find the title, History 328, or you can just look for the rather frightening picture of Malthael, the angel of death from Diablo 3, that I've posted as the course picture. So that should really probably stand out from the other blank or more mundane photos of your other courses. So you can go ahead and click on that to go in. You'll also see underneath here that we have some other kind of quick options. So we can go right to the assignment page, you can go right to the discussions page, which will be for our posts and our weekly kind of blog discussions, as well as go right to the files. I'll show you guys each of these as we go through. So when you come in here, you'll automatically be directed to the assignments page. So looking at that, you can see all these assignments that are going to be due throughout the course of the semester. Now, this may seem like a ton of work throughout, but it really isn't, I promise. So, typically every single week we'll have just a brief summary due for the readings as well as a brief discussion post, kind of in lieu of what we would normally have as classroom conversation in a traditional course. So since we're online, you're not going to have to listen to me talk for, 6 hours a week or whatever it would equate to. But instead of that, you're going to have to go ahead and kind of give your own feedback to the class about the readings and the lectures and what you've been thinking about. And then you'll receive comments from your classmates and you'll give them comments. And so this is kind of the online version of the class discussion. So you can see that we have all of these. So discussion post 1, discussion post 2, 3, etc., etc. But then some of the other more kind of the non-recurring written assignments. So we'll have a paper topic proposal due. We'll have a video game genre analysis paper due, an anti-bibliography, and then, of course, your final paper, your final project. Now, for each of these assignments, you can always click on them, and they'll give you a more detailed description of what you have to do for that particular assignment. So, for instance, for all the discussion posts, they're very similar. So, in about 500 or more words, you need to respond to the readings and lectures that you read for this week. Now, I'll point out exactly what that corresponds to with this current week, with the first week, once we move into the syllabus. So we will revisit what you should be doing with this discussion post. And again, these discussion posts will recur every single week with the exception of the very last week. So you'll have 5 of these discussion posts to do. Similarly, you will also have 5 reading summaries due. These are much shorter. You're just doing a 1 to 3 sentence summary of the articles and chapters that we're reading. Most weeks it's anywhere from kind of 3 to 5 different readings, so I don't need a whole big analysis or explanation, just a nice crisp 1 to 3 sentence summary in which you're showing what the central argument, the main purpose of that paper is, how effective, what's the strengths and weaknesses of that article or that chapter, and then what evidence is the author relying on. So mainly this assignment is to teach you to read sometimes complex, sometimes more simplistic literature about video games, about history, about the past, and be able to kind of condense it and explain it back to me in a very concise, descriptive manner. So this is a very good exercise for handling information for this kind of critical reading and analysis. This is the assignments page. I have it automatically directed here as the home screen, but if you were to actually click the assignments tab, you'd have the exact same result. So moving on then, we have the discussions tab. This is where you will actually be doing your weekly discussion posts and your discussion comments. So for instance, the discussion post number 1 is pinned because it's the first week. So you would go ahead and click on here, and then you would go ahead and make your reply, make your post. I have the description here again, so you know what you should be talking about, and there's some kind of starting questions that you might want to think about to help you get moving, and so forth. The other thing that I ask for this first discussion post is that when you begin, please go ahead and give your classmates as well as myself, a brief introduction about yourself. Who you are, what your major is, maybe what some of your interests are, your hobbies, and maybe a good question is, what drew you to this class? Why video games? Why do video games interest you? Maybe what's your favorite video game? So these sorts of fun details about yourself so we can all get to know one another. The next section is the grades, and this is pretty self-explanatory. So you would come here and you'd be able to see what your grade is for each of these assignments and each of these topics. The next important tab on this Elms site are the files. The files are going to be extremely important because this is what's going to house not only some detailed descriptions about some of the assignments, but the course lectures, right? So the lecture that you're currently listening to is going to be under the lectures folder. And you'll see under the lectures folder, all these lectures are organized into weeks. So you click on week 1 and you'd have the 4 main lectures for that week. Week 2, the 4 main lectures, etc., etc. Now, as far as the lectures are concerned, there will be 4 lectures each week. Some shorter, some longer. And how that's going to basically work is every single week, such as what you're listening to right now, I'll begin with an introductory lecture. And so with that, I'll explain what the different topics and readings and things we'll be looking at for that week are. But also for each week, I'll discuss what assignments are due and also give you some more information and more feedback about what is expected on the current assignments. So for instance, at the end of week 2, your topic proposal assignments due. So for the first lecture next week, on the week overview, I will be discussing the topic proposal, what I expect, what it should look like, how to go about it. So it's very important to begin the week with these lecture overviews. The other important folder is the readings folder. When you go into the readings folder, again organized by week, you'll see that when you go into the week, you'll have listed all of the readings for that week. The exception is there may be readings from our course textbook, Playing with the Past. So for the first week, there's actually 5 readings, but I've put the 4 in here that are not included in that textbook. So when you look at the syllabus, and we'll look at that in just a second, you'll see a total of 5 readings, and for any of the readings that aren't in that Playing with the Past book, I'll denote that you can find them on Elms. So this is where you in fact do find them on the Elms page, is in this folder for the appropriate week under readings. Given the nature of some of these readings, as well as some of these lectures we'll be talking about, you should feel adequately warned that there may well be spoilers for different video games. There may well be certain portrayals of violence or even sexuality that you may find offensive or alarming. So please know that there are these sort of spoilers and triggers that may crop up in this course. Turning now to the syllabus. You can find the syllabus just right on the top here in the Files folder. So you'll see History 328I syllabus. You go ahead and click on that, it'll open it up, right? Or you can download it as a PDF, print it out for your files, what have you. But this is our course syllabus. This is the same syllabus that I sent out to you guys a week ago. There's a very low chance that anything on the syllabus will change in terms of the readings, in terms of the lectures, but if it does change, I will always email you to let you know that there's an updated version of the syllabus. Again, I do not anticipate anything changing, but if it does, I will let you know. So let's move now through the syllabus, briefly read through this, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, again, with what the point of this class is, my expectations, and all of these sorts of questions. So since this course is online, we obviously won't have a classroom, and I also won't hold regular office hours, as professors typically do during regular semester courses. That certainly does not mean that I'm unable or unwilling to meet with you, however. So if you do want to meet, discuss topics, you have questions, you want to look at some of the assignments, by all means, email me at either of these emails, and we can get together, meet up on campus, and discuss these things. If we do end up meeting in person, which would be lovely, my office is 2126 in Talifer Hall. Now, Talifer, if you don't know, it's on the main mall. So if you're looking directly at McKeldin Library from the main mall on campus, it'll be on your left. It's about middle of the way on the left. It's to the left of Tidings, and it's to the right of Skinner and Marymount and those buildings. So you'll see the front of the building says Francis Scott Key. The back half of the building, though, is Talifer. So just know that which is the history building, that is where my office is if we do meet up in person. Now, the purpose of History 328. So the purpose of this course is to encourage students to think about history, historical causation, and the dynamic nature of historiography through the lens of video games. As one of the most popular forms of entertainment across the world, video games work both overtly and subconsciously to shape our understanding of our own culture as well as the culture and world of the past. Yet, with any representation of history, both popular and scholarly, it is important to approach such works critically, given possible biases, motivations, and limitations that might obscure an objective recounting of history. So the final project of this course, you guys are going to be analyzing a video game, again, of your own choosing, and arguing how well, for better or for worse, it simulates the historical era and the events that it's supposed to represent. So that means if you choose the first Assassin's Creed, you'd be doing more of the Crusades, medieval era. If you do Gettysburg Armchair General, you'll be doing more of the Civil War era. So again, it's whatever era you choose based on that video game. And we'll discuss further, there are certain video games that I'll put the axe to, that I won't let you do. So these are video games that simply don't try to be historical, or aren't meant to be set in a historical genre, or a historical backdrop. If you can make a strong case for why the game should be included, or why the game has historical influences, by all means, I'm very willing to work with that. So for instance, if you want to do Skyrim or Morrowind or one of the Elder Scroll games, even though those games are very much high fantasy, dragons, wizards, elves, if you want to explore how there actually are influenced by medieval history or Nordic or Viking history, I'm willing to work with you for these sorts of questions. Simply though, there will be some games that will not work. So over the next 2 weeks, you need to be thinking about what game are you passionate about, do you think would be interesting to work on, but also what game would make a good paper in which you're analyzing the historical accuracy or the historical influences of it. So students will explore ways in which history and video games intersect, how video games help to shape and are themselves shaped by our understanding of history. Video games will be analyzed closely as forms of popular historiography, meaning how video games themselves interpret and recreate history. This course, after all, remains a course in history. Much of the class will be spent learning about historical periods in their own right, informed by current trends and interpretations in historical scholarship. This course will likewise emphasize the historian's craft, meaning what is it that historians do. So in preparation for the final project, students will learn the essential skills that are at the core of what it means to be a historian, how to properly read, research, write, and argue in a concise and critical manner. Students will also learn how to identify, analyze, and critique primary and secondary sources. Now, if you're not sure what that means, we'll be discussing what sources are in our next lecture. Given the short 6-week duration of the course, students will decide on the topic for their final paper at the end of the second week to ensure that they have enough time to conduct the research, play through the video game, and read the appropriate primary and secondary source evidence for the project. So that's the gist of the course. We'll be looking at history, historiography, and video games. Now, as I mentioned before, Playing with the Past, the book edited by Matthew Capel, is our course textbook. hopefully you have already gotten the book because you need to get it ASAP. Pretty much every week has at least one reading from that text. There may be many readings we have, though, that aren't in the book. So rather than have you have to pay for another book, I have copied, scanned, pulled offline all of the other readings for the course. As you'll see when we look at the course schedule, many of the readings will say ELMS in parentheses next to them. That means, as I said before, that you can find that reading in the reading folder under the File tab on the ELMS page. As far as the grading for the course goes, your discussion posts and your comments will be worth 30% of the grade. So actually the largest graded component of the course tied with the final paper. These should be easy points for you guys to get. All you have to do is listen to the lectures, do the readings, and then post what your thoughts are, what your problems with them were, and all of these sorts of things. Next, and what should be another source of easy points, are the reading summaries. Again, these are the 1 to 3 sentences for each reading that you will turn in at the end of each week. Next, we have kind of the steps towards the final project. So first is the topic proposal, and we'll discuss that more next week, but that's simply you giving me your first choice of video game as well as your second choice of video game and talking about why you think it would be interesting, why it would be a good fit, and what aspects of the game that you want to look at for the final paper. Next is what's called an annotated bibliography. This is where you gather up the evidence you'll be using to argue for your paper, and you kind of do an analysis of each of those sources. Again, we will talk about that in a few weeks. Next is the genre analysis. This is a standalone assignment, and what you'll be doing for this assignment, this is week 4, is you will be looking at a variety of different video game genres, which we'll talk about mainly today, and you will argue which of these genres you think is the best fit for simulating and recreation history and why. And also you'll talk about, even if you think that turn-based strategy games are the best, or open world action games are the best, whatever you think is the best, you'll have to justify it, and you'll also have to point out what the strengths are of that genre as well as the strengths of the other genres, and of course their weaknesses as well. So this is week 4, we'll revisit that then. And finally, due at the very end of class, the last Friday of the summer semester here, is the final paper. And this is worth 30% of your total grade. Again, the final paper is you looking at and analyzing one particular video game to judge how well it simulates and recreates history. So just like you do with your topic proposal, you have to think about what aspects of the game you want to look at. It'll probably be too much for a 6 to 7 page paper. It'll be too much to look at every single aspect. So for instance, if you were to look at Assassin's Creed, you might want to look at the religious feeling, the religious fervor of the game. Or you could look at the kind of the social and the cultural aspects of the game. Or the combat and the fight and the murder, these aspects of the game, the violence of the times. Whichever aspects you choose to look at will be great, and we'll discuss them as we move forward with the project. Moving on to class expectations. Despite the fact that this is an online course, it's not a traditional classroom lecture course, there really are similar expectations. So you should be doing the assigned readings for class each week. You should be reading through these readings carefully and thoroughly. Don't just skim over them. Don't not read them. It's very apparent when you do that. And then once you've done these readings and done the lectures, you need to be giving kind of open, honest, and thoughtful posts each week on the discussion board. So in terms of the due date, pretty much all of the written assignments that are posted on the syllabus are due Sunday at 10 p.m. So right before the end of the week, Sunday at 10 p.m. The exception of that, other than the final paper, are the discussion posts. The discussion posts are due Friday at midnight, 11:59 p.m. The reason those are due a few days earlier is because they have to be posted so that you and your classmates have enough time to look at them, read through them, and give comments for your classmates' posts. Ultimately, you guys as students are expected to be attentive, honest, and open throughout the course. So in terms of the written assignments, as we just said, they're typically due at the end of the week on Sunday. Now, these assignments are designed to help you understand how to read primary sources and secondary scholarship and how to be successful in conducting research and making clear and engaging arguments. History at its core is all about argumentation. All of the assignments will be turned in on Elms. The directions for each of these assignments are posted under those assignments. As with anything though, if you have questions about an assignment, you need clarification, something doesn't make sense, just email me. I'll always get back to you right away and answer those questions. Given the very condensed nature of the 6-week course, any work that's late automatically has a 5% penalty per day that it's late. Now, obviously, if there's some serious illness or religious obligations or family crises, exceptions will be made. The general rule of thumb is, for there to be an exception, I have to know about it beforehand. So the Monday after the assignment was due, you email me and saying that you were sick over the weekend isn't going to cut it. In the same way, computer troubles and issues with that, not an excuse. Make sure if you're working on the computer, save often, back up your work, use Google Docs or use Dropbox, whatever you need to do to make sure that you don't have these computer issues. And for every written assignment that you turn in, it should always be typed in double-spaced. Normal size font, Arial, Times New Roman, size 12, easy, easy, easy. Now obviously, as you're listening right now, we will not be having the traditional classroom lectures. Instead, we'll be having these posted lectures each week. As I said before, there's going to be 4 main lectures. In general, there's going to be the introductory lecture that we talked about before, and then there's going to be 3 main lectures each week. The first will be on the historical period in question. The second will be on one of the video games we'll look at and play through for that week. And the third will be looking at the assigned readings for that week. So we'll have the introductory lecture, we'll have history, video game, historiography, in that order. Now, as you work through the weeks and get your assignments done, there is an order of operations to do it. There's a SOP order you should be approaching each of these weeks, and it is as follows. First, you should listen to the introductory lecture, as you're listening to now. You should then listen to the history as well as the video game lectures. Next, you should do all of your assigned readings. Only after you've read through all of those readings carefully should you listen to and watch the 4th and final lecture for the week, which in fact goes over those readings. It's unbelievably obvious when students don't do the readings themselves and just listen to my analysis of the readings. It comes across in your reading summaries, it comes across in your blog posts. Do the readings yourself, form your own opinions and understandings of them, and then come into that 4th lecture. As we mentioned, discussion posts due at the end of each week on Friday. Your comments then will be due on that Sunday, the normal due date for written assignments. Similarly, reading summaries every single week with the exception of last week. Easy points due Sunday at 10. Now with both of these types of assignments, as well as all of the assignments, if you have questions, email me, but there's a fairly detailed description on the actual assignment, both when you open up that week's discussion post, as well as when you click the assignment in Elms. Now here's an important aspect of this course particularly. When it comes to history, and when it comes to video games, I, as the instructor, am going to assume that you as students know very little background on these topics. I won't assume that you know a lot about history. I won't assume that you've played a lot of video games. I will not make those assumptions. So you should also not make those assumptions about your classmates. Every student, and even myself, we're coming in with various backgrounds in these different disciplines and in these different understandings. So because of that, whether it's about historical knowledge or gaming concepts or just the art of making arguments and reading critically, there will be no such thing as stupid questions or ignorant questions in this class. Do not feel embarrassed about asking basic questions throughout these 6 weeks. If you say, what's Skyrim? Or what's Rome? Or what really is history, right? I've never taken a history course. Those are all fine. What is needed to do well in this course is not background knowledge. It's not prior knowledge. It's effort, attentiveness, and engagement. Hard work, critical reading, doing the assignments, giving honest and thoughtful posts. This is what will allow you to do well in this course, not background knowledge. So for the 3/4 of the students who aren't history majors, No sweat. Do not worry about it. There's more information on the syllabus here about academic integrity, religious observances, academic support. They're very important. You should give them a read over, but I won't cover them with you guys here. The final aspect of the syllabus then is the breakdown of our calendar for the course. So we only have 6 weeks. With that in mind, we have to be focused and we have to get through a decent amount of discussions and readings through these 6 weeks. So each week on the syllabus, you'll see the title of the week right now, Introduction, Historiography, and Video Game Basics. This is what the main focus is for the lectures and the readings for this week. Week 2, History and Simulation. So we'll be doing a lot of readings about how is history simulated and what are the advantages and disadvantages of using video games as a way to simulate and reenact and recreate history. On top of that, though, we'll also be discussing parts of the ancient world, so classical Athens, as well as looking at the video game Age of Mythology. So we'll be looking at these different areas of history and these different video games throughout each of these weeks. Now, on the syllabus, it's very apparent what our focus is for each week. Other than the title itself, you can see 3 different categories here of things that you have due. Again, realistically, you should have them due by Friday at midnight so you can make your discussion post. Although the other written assignments aren't due until Sunday at 10. So for the first week, this current week, you will have your first set of discussion posts and comments, and then your first set of reading summaries. That's all you have due, no other assignments. Next, what are the readings due? You should read through the course syllabus, which we're doing together now. You should also read a brief selection from the ancient historian Polybius, from his histories, which you'll actually do midway through the next lecture, so you can hold off on that. And then we have 3 of these readings that are due, and these are discussing, again, these basics of how do we use history, or how do we use video games to discuss history. So very basics. The first one is from our textbook, Playing with the Past, pages 1 to 23. The next 2 are both posted on Elms. So we have an article about teaching history by Wainwright, and we also have an article about PC games and teaching history by McMichael. So again, you can go to the Elms folder, marked readings, open up week 1, and you'll see all these readings. Now, for each of these sets of readings, I assure you I'm not trying to overload you with a lot of readings. There'll be some weeks where you'll see a ton of readings. So for instance, week 3 here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 readings. Seems like a lot. But for the most part, these readings are quite short. So for instance, this article, Video Games in Classical Antiquity, it's only 2 or 3 pages long. It's a real short read. Just because there's multiple articles to read, don't fret. Don't freak out. It's not that much reading, I promise you. The other thing with these readings is that, for instance, in Playing with the Past, we have this chapter looking at total war and civilization, kind of the value of simulation. It looks like it's 16 pages. Page 33 to page 48. Again, even that is not actually 16 full pages because there's notes at the end, there's sometimes pictures that block up pages. So again, don't worry, it's not that much reading. The goal is not to overload you with reading just because it's a 6-week course, promise. Week 3 then we'll be discussing imperialism in the ancient world. So we'll be looking at kind of the history of ancient Rome briefly, but also looking at the Rome Total War series. So we'll be looking at Rome 1 as well as Rome 2. And with some of the readings for the week, we'll also be looking at Civilization and some other games as well. Week 4 is our medieval period week, and so we'll actually be looking at medieval eschatology, or the study of the end times, the study of angels and demons and witches. So it should be a very interesting week. So for our lectures that week, we'll be discussing witches and angels and demons in the medieval era, and then specifically looking at Diablo 3. A lot of the week's readings for that week also deal with Dante's Inferno. We'll be able to look through some of these visions of hell and these journeys through the underworld and these sorts of very interesting aspects of the medieval era. Week 5 then, we move on to more of the modern world, and this is the idea of counterfactual history. So in some ways, not just recreating history in the past, but creating history in the present and in the future. Counterfactual history. So with this, we'll be looking at apocalypse. So not kind of the heaven-hell apocalypse of the medieval era, but a lot of the modern notions of apocalypse. the Fallout series. We'll be looking at some of the different zombie video games and what our video game obsession with zombies is all about and how that reflects both on and away from our own culture, and these sorts of interesting questions. Finally, week 6 is pretty much dedicated just for you working on your final paper. There's only one lecture, and it's about writing the paper. So it's about, mistakes to avoid, how to go about framing and organizing, and what writing a good thesis actually is, and these sorts of questions. But in terms of other lecture readings, all of these things, nothing is due on that final week other than your final paper. So it should be a fairly quick but a fairly enjoyable and fun 6 weeks for everyone. I'm very much looking forward to meeting all of you virtually and maybe in person, and I am more than happy to have you all in class this short but very exciting summer semester. So with all that housekeeping out of the way, we can go ahead and move on to our actual content lectures moving forward. I'll see you in the next lecture, in which we talk about what history and historiography actually are.